Well, hey, everybody, it's 2022. Did you know that? Mike,
We're
did you know it's
back.
2022? We're back.
Because
We're
I'm
back.
painfully aware that it's 2022. Yes,
What's it been?
better be better than the last 2 years too.
Yeah, What's it been? 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I mean,
I think it's three.
since we talked last, we had a crippling snowstorm here in the Pacific Northwest. We had rain.
More rain.
Some of our folks had tornadoes, floods. It's getting biblical. Um, and you just got your booster. How you feeling, man?
Let's call it partially crappy. I think that's accurate. I just got it yesterday, and I got to tell you, my arm is so sore. It was really hard to sleep last night. I don't think I'm going to have, a flu-like reaction from this, but dang, that little needle hurt my arm. Not when it happened, but after that.
It is interesting that it is it's a little needle, and it does give you a pain for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of, time gone by since we last spoke, in the InfoSec business, this has been geologic time in terms of how much has happened. I'm a little worried that our 15 minutes here isn't going to do it. We're probably going to go long.
You think so?
Yeah, we're getting interesting joint alerts from the FBI and CISA, about nation states going to use APT techniques, against the private sector. At the same time, the great resignation is draining off our ability to manage security, especially in a lot of the mid-market. So it's a little foreboding out there right now.
Yeah, true. Hey, I know you want to dive into all the things going on. I do also have to say that one of the things that happened, and you might hear it in the background, is we did get a pandemic puppy, and
Oh, yeah.
she did get spayed yesterday, and so she's in here in the office because she's not allowed to go up and down the stairs, and she is not happy. And so if you hear whining in the background, pandemic puppy. So, a couple of things to know for everybody. Number one, if you go to our homepage, criticalinsight.com, and go to the bottom, we've made it easier to sign up for Mike's Blast. He's been doing it for 15 years. Everything we discuss here is in the Blast. It's a daily email. Mike actually does it. He doesn't let anybody else do it. And it's the articles that he thinks you should see every day. People really love it. And so go to our homepage, sign up for it. Super great. The other thing is I'm going to put a link into the chat of Aleth's. Aleth is one of our consultants. She did a podcast episode on the Darknet Diaries, and it is super great. So two things, number one, three things. One, if you can hear the whining in the background, that's puppy. Number two, the Darknet Diaries with Aleth, and I'll put a thing in the chat. And number three, sign up for the Blast so you can hear Mike pontificating.
Pontificating?
Yeah, pontificating. Isn't that what you do every morning? And if you're interested or know somebody who could use a little education on internet badass, tomorrow's free security awareness training, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. I'll put the link in there to register in the chat also, or in the comments. Everyone's welcome. Okay, Hamilton, rundown on what's been going on.
Okay, well, we're not going to be able to cover everything because in 3 weeks, so much has happened, but just a little sampling. Here's a bunch of stories with a little bit of commentary along the way. And then we'll talk about what all this means, to the extent that anybody can really decipher any of this. I'll bring up one having to do with our pal Log4j, although I think it's interesting that CISA said they don't see widespread impact, which is weird because the scanning was off the chart, right? I mean, everybody saw the signal is. But here's the new development. It has to do with the Federal Trade Commission. So Log4j now is an enforcement risk for public companies, right? So you're a public company and you're under like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act about internal controls and things like that. Well, what the Federal Trade Commission is going to do is if you have some kind of event, right, some kind of, network meltdown, and then they come in and they are assessing whether or not you were meeting standards of practice. One thing they're going to look at is your response to the Log4j vulnerability and how you got after that and how you scanned your environment, tried to find it, and what your patching operation looked like. And if that wasn't up to snuff, that will weigh on the fine that they levy. So heads up on that. The Federal Trade Commission is really getting into the act here of trying to be one of the enforcement arms of the federal government of getting everybody to maintain these standards of practice. And now they're going to start putting fines behind this. This is going to get much more real very quickly. We talked about a lot about the fact that, the rhetorical change from the federal government about the use of ransomware against critical infrastructure, specifically in the health sector. You do that, you're a terrorist, you're not a criminal. And what we said was, well, this is going to force a change from these gangs flattening these networks to just stealing the records and holding them for extortion, right? Because then you go back to being a criminal. You did not disrupt a hospital operation, you just stole their records. Sure enough, there is an escalation in healthcare data breaches, okay? And this is why I think it's going on. It's because it's safer for the criminals to do it this way. So, interesting article about how many of these have been going on. California is hit the hardest, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and District of Columbia. And yes, I'm reading that. I'm not remembering that. But,
very impressive memory, Mike.
Yeah, no. Moving on. Another really interesting development here about risk transference, right? The issue of insurance. And so, especially in the mid-market, the tendency has been, well, let's not invest in all of these controls. Let's just get the insurance. And if, in the odd chance something actually happens, we're covered. Well, we've talked about insurance companies becoming the de facto regulators.
Just talked about that yesterday with our sales team. Yep.
Exactly. So if the insurance company says you have to have these controls in place in order to get insured, and your strategy was before, let's not do the controls, let's just buy the insurance, congratulations, now you have to do both. You have to invest in all the controls and you have to buy the insurance. So, that strategy of, kind of evasion of responsibility to meet standards of practice is out the window. Remember we talked about how China had been amassing data on U.S. residents through the theft of some of these really, really big data sets like the Office of Personnel Management. Nobody knows what happened to the Equifax data, right? And so we think that, this is all being exposed to AI and machine learning and number crunching to figure out associations between Americans, who knows who. So if I want to get to that person to turn them as an asset, I work through these three people to get there. Well, the new thing China is doing is they're investing in tools to understand public sentiment on social media in the United States. Why? Because this is one way they target dissidents, and frankly, the press that is not kind to China. And they are going to then counter this with, I'll say disinformation, but, things that are more flattering to China. And this has raised the question as to what's the strategic value to the United States of information like that, right? Is this, vital to national security to protect, journalists and dissidents in the United States by not allowing them to be exposed to, this kind of data mining? I don't know. Open question. It's going to generate a lot of dialogue around that. Let's see. What's been going on between Israel and Iran, I am sure. This is a harbinger of things to come. So, this kind of, back and forth going on that has included dams, gas stations, power plants, ports, right? This is exactly the kind of thing that everybody has been concerned about coming and landing on our doorstep, and that's getting closer and closer. And so watching what's been going on there, I think, is instructive as to what could potentially happen here.
A lot in your head. You got any more?
I'll give you one more, and this is crazy. Okay, so of course, a Bluetooth using home COVID test was cracked to fake the results. Okay, you could change one byte value representing the status of the test, and followed by calculating a new cyclic redundancy check and checksum values, and you could fake your vaccine status. So there.
Wait, your vaccine status or your test, right?
Your test status. right?
Yeah.
I
So
mean, to the extent that anybody would want to do that, but it just
yeah.
goes to
So
show all of these apps that showed up. It's like, oh, we got a
Mhm.
pandemic. Let's get everybody an app. Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to get pummeled, and
so,
sure enough,
so you take your COVID test and then it says you're pregnant. That makes sense. That
right?
makes sense.
Two
Uh,
lines.
2 lines. Do you get a? Will it make it a plus? Um,
No.
that. So that sounded like the kicker, but we have some time left. Good kicker though, Mike.
Yeah. Well, so okay, now I think we should catch up on what's going on the last couple of days.
Uh huh.
So SZA and the because and there's this big gap between. So all of those things I just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
that's circa December 27th. All right, and then all this other stuff has happened that we don't have time to cover. But let's get caught up to current. SZA and the FBI, like I said, just put out a joint warning to the private sector about Russian APT activity. And again, this is the thing, we've talked a lot about it here, we've all known this has been coming, and the interpretation is that geopolitical and diplomatic tensions may result in an uptick in more sophisticated attack techniques, right? Probably using the false flag of, hey, we're a ransomware operator, but that's not really who's behind it, with more of the intent to just disrupt things, right? That is
So
not good.
so wait. So when you say APT, here's how I interpret that: advanced persistent threat. It's a group using advanced techniques to gain persistence in networks. So the group can surveil, map, design,
Yep.
an ultimate disaster that, may or may not come later. Um, that trigger, may never be pulled. Like we're waiting on some stuff for Log4j, and there was something else last year where there was a big vuln, but I'm not sure anything came of it. Like all the stories about how power infrastructure is known to be compromised, but I haven't seen anything come from it.
Right.
If they're known to be compromised, it means we found them in there. That APT, right?
Yeah. So that's a pretty good description. I can live with that. Did you take a Udemy course or something?
No, everything I learned from Facebook.
Okay.
So what's your call to action here?
So to me, this really brings monitoring into focus. Network and device data analytics, eyes on glass,
Mm-hmm.
because there may be some sneaky techniques coming that allow undesireds into your network, and you're going to have to rely on how well you see their behavior later. Like alerting on what looks like the use of routine system administration tools, and investigate every one of those. Right? Don't just think this is normal stuff. I mean, stuff that would generally pass for, oh, this happens every day. You're going to have to start looking at this, and as 24/7 as you can get it, with a smart, curious person checking it all out.
Ooh, is that a commercial for us? That sounded like a commercial for Critical Insight.
So that was a short commercial that will not follow you around the internet. Yes. But before I leave this topic, I'll say that there was interesting story in Defense One or something like that. It was one of the defense, publications. And it said, and I'm paraphrasing, the U.S. could smoke Russia and China with some well-placed cyber attacks. Okay, so just stick a pin in that. We may come back to that later next week or something.
That's a hell of a
What?
way to leave that. But okay. Before we have to go, yeah, just toss that one out there, Mike. Go ahead. Any threats and vulns you want to hit?
In a sec. First, I want to hit on this infrastructure bill and the grant funding that's going to go to state and local governments. So the update is we're at the stage where nothing has happened. Apparently, states still need to craft their visions for infrastructure funding, and that includes cybersecurity funding to local governments. So funding is going to be distributed partly by formula and partly through competition or risk prioritization, okay? And there's a dedicated set aside for rural cities and counties, but we're all still waiting on details. So I'll keep coming back to this every week until we get better information and can, provide guidance as to what local governments need to start doing.
Good. I don't know if you can hear what's going on behind me, but the puppy is the puppy's saying. All right. Um,
A little upset.
the puppy is very upset.
I would be too.
So either this talk is going to go viral because you can hear yipping behind me, or you can't hear it, and then I'm just talking about something you can't hear. So I remember that that K-12 has been one of your particular
Oh, yeah.
focuses, both because of a lot of incidents at school, but also because wasn't there a company that provide website infrastructure, and CISA put out a warning about that? And another one was the municipal bond status may be affected by how prepared local governments are.
Yeah.
Like you can't raise money for potholes if you're easily breached.
Yeah. Yeah. All true. And I mean, so later, let's talk about a lot of stuff because this is going to be a very animated year. I think we can agree there is really no way to catch up from the last 3 weeks, but threats and vulnerabilities. And Lloyd's of London continues to articulate what they will not cover. And it's all related to the nation state stuff we know is coming, right? It's all connected to acts of war. So everybody is lining up for this thing to happen. So again, we'll come back to that. Okay, threats and vulnerabilities. Briefly, there's one called the Y2k22 vulnerability. I won't explain it. It has to do with time. But things like Sonic Wall are impacted. Older Honda and Acura vehicles. Okay, so it's a time thing. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but you are going to lose time synchronization if you don't tend to this one. There's a huge Microsoft patch bundle. Do not resist. There is one wormable vulnerability in Windows Server and many versions of Windows Server, so get after that one. 8 new families of Mac OS malware. Okay, so time for all you smug Mac users to get paranoid with the rest of us. QNAP. QNAP says if you have a network attached storage device that is accessible from the internet, get it off immediately. That sounds like pretty good advice to me. There was a Trojanized version of a tool called DNS Spy, which is a debugger and assembly editor that's used by researchers for analyzing malware. Okay, it's got all kinds of crypto mining, cryptocurrency theft, remote access, all packed into this thing if you happen to download this from GitHub. Okay, and then I'll give you one more. Millions of routers are exposed to remote code execution by a bug in something called the USB kernel. So home devices are threatened. Again, home devices get compromised, and typically they're used for distributed denial of service attacks. So you could be attacking Lockheed if you and not know it.
And before I have to take this dog out, any kickers?
So it has to be this one. The video made by China's state media that parodies the international bans on Huawei technologies. It is hysterical. I shot you that link earlier. If you have it, still paste it into the chat. This is so worth watching. I'll just tell you, the main character's name is James Pond.
James Pond? Is that like 00? Is that like H200?
You're just gonna have to watch it, man. You're just gonna have to watch it. It is hysterically funny, and I don't know if it's the cultural difference or if it's intended to be such a parody, but it's really funny. China State Media.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Remember, come to security awareness training on Friday. Watch Aleth, or listen to Aleth and Darknet Diaries. We have 2 events next week.
Right.
Number 1 is hiring and retaining cybersecurity staff and the talent problems and what to do about them. And the other is how to prepare for the next big global cyber event. If you need invites to those, you can go to the events page on our website or email me, jake@criticalinsight.com. That's jake@criticalinsight.com. All right, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.